you got to be a leader. And then all the things to be a good leader might include humility. You can definitely be a better leader if you're humble, decisiveness, I don't know about hunger. And I honestly don't know about smart, because like, I think those are nice to haves, but are you thinking strategically? Can you adapt to changing circumstances? Because so many companies that go under because they couldn't adapt. They couldn't pivot. They're not able to be agile. Hey, everybody, back with another episode, issue, and print edition of the Business Lunch Podcast with Ryan Dice on the other side, not speaking right now. Ryan, how you doing?
I'm doing excellently. How about you?
I'm doing fabulous, and I am Roland Frazier, your co-host. What we're going to talk about today is something that you have found that I think we'll have some interesting discussion about. You want to tee it up?
Yes. So what is the number one character trait that CEOs need right now? That was the question that was proposed. It was this Inc. magazine article that states that this is the number one trait that CEOs need right now. I want to state at the outset, I don't typically read a lot of Inc. magazine articles. I feel like most of these publications, it's just kind of blah content.
It's fluff. It's like 7 things you need to do this, and then you read it and it's like, strive for more, think positive. There's nothing useful in 95% of the articles that I see on there.
Yeah, and I feel like this one is kind of in that same area. And that's why I want to discuss it, not because, I think it's a particularly great article, but
welcome
just
to
the premise
no value issue of the Business Lunch Podcast. You will get absolutely nothing from listening to this.
Exactly. Yeah. What we're doing is we're taking something that was worthless and we're going to really expound upon it.
Excellent.
Yeah, we want you to totally regret subscribing to this podcast, listening to it. And no, that's not it at all. I think there's a couple things at play here that I want to get into, but I did just want to start. I mean, the basic premise of the article is that the single most important character trait today for a CEO is, wait for a drum roll, please, humility. Humility is the most important character trait that a CEO must have, particularly today, because a lot of things are changing and life is hard and all this other stuff. And so I just wanted to say, I got thoughts and feelings about this. Apparently, this came out of a study and some comments that some big muckety mucks at PricewaterhouseCoopers made. I'm just curious, how does that hit you? We're hiring for CEOs, humility being the most important trait. Go.
I guess it depends on important to whom, because I have actual data that says somewhere around 85 to high 90s % of CEOs of Fortune 500 companies are males who are above 6 feet tall. And that apparently is the most important characteristic if you're trying to get a CEO job at one of those companies. I refer you to Tim Cook. But anyway, no, man, if we're looking at CEOs, I think that humility is a great quality to have, and it certainly can help you make good decisions. But I think there's a lot of core skills that are far more important. You could be very, very humble and a terrible communicator. You could be very, very humble and terribly incompetent, or short-sighted, or difficult to get along with, or not listen to what other people have to say. I mean, and God forbid you also know how to run a company and have experience and history in the industry and taking a company of that size to whatever the next level is. So it's very, very nice to have and helpful, certainly, to be a better person and a better leader. But I don't think if I've got only one skill or 3 that I have to pick for our next CEO to have, I don't think that's going to be one of them. What do you think?
So the overall meta message that I think is worth mentioning is, stop turning to this type of content for any advice whatsoever. Now, I do think it's worth having a conversation about, what are some of the traits that make up like a good CEO. I think that is something worth doing because I know a lot of the folks who are listening are either investors who are looking to hire CEOs for their companies, and so they're out there doing it. And I also know a lot of folks who are listening are entrepreneurs who want to be, amazing CEOs. So I do think that humility is important. Have you read the book, The Ideal Team Player by
I have
Patrick
not.
Lencioni?
I have not.
So Ideal Team Player, Patrick Lencioni, great book, love it. I think anybody, if you're doing a lot of hiring, it's a phenomenal book to read. And he basically says that an ideal team player, of which the CEO should be one of those two, possesses three overlapping traits: humble, hungry, smart. Humble is one of them, like we define that. That is important. Hungry, that you have a general drive, and then smart. He said, yeah, I mean, there's an aspect of basic competency, but that's kind of permission to play. Really, what you're looking at there is like people smarts, having some emotional intelligence, the ability to communicate with others, and that it is the combination of those three things that makes someone an ideal team player. And he talks about how, if you're lacking one, like let's say you're humble and you're smart, but you're not hungry. He calls that person the lovable slacker, right? And that's where, to your point, like you can have people who are humble, but if they're missing one of those areas, then they're not going to be ideal. So I think
I'm gonna tell you, I don't think that's any more helpful. I think that's just more marketing stuff, and that's why I can't. That's why I don't read his books, because I've tried. Because I know that you and a lot of the guys over at Scalable like them and have gotten something. And I've tried, and it just strikes me like John Maxwell and so many other ones that I'm reading, and I'm like, you've come up with a thing to market that's a framework, and that's good, but how helpful is that? Because like when we talk about the 5 exits, we talk about moving from doing to delegating, and delegating to leading, right? So you move from, you're working the line, then you become a manager, and then the big difference between a manager and a CEO is none of those things, right? You can be a stupid CEO that follows a great playbook. You cannot be hungry but dedicated, and you can be an arrogant, son of a gun. Just look at most of the big CEOs of successful Fortune 500 companies. So it sounds good, and then you can do this. Well, if you have 3 but you don't have 2, a 2-legged stool can't stand. You've got to be a leader. I think you have to be a leader, right? And so to me, I know one of our business partners, Richard Linder's, very big on leadership culture. You got to be a leader, and then all the things to be a good leader might include humility. You can definitely be a better leader if you're humble. Decisiveness. I don't know about hunger, and I honestly don't know about smart, because I think those are nice to haves. But, are you thinking strategically? Can you adapt to changing circumstances? Because so many companies that go under because they couldn't adapt. They couldn't pivot. They're not able to be agile. They're not able to make decisions even. Certainly not the hard ones. I love Steve Jobs kept getting hit with, but if we release the iPhone and we put on the iPhone, the iPod things, we're going to cannibalize the market for our iPod, so we should not release the iPhone. And he's like, screw that. We should always be cannibalizing ourselves. We should always be ever improving. And he made the hard decisions, and he was an arrogant son of a gun. Ask anybody that worked with him, and not humble at all, right? And certainly very smart. So he was a one-legged stool for the book you're mentioning. So I just feel like you got to be able to adapt and communicate and lead and make decisions, and hopefully be strategic. I think those are, like actual important things. Like you said it, if we were hiring for CEO, what would we ask for? Would we interview them and say, okay, I don't know if you're going to tick the humble, smart, and, hungry boxes, but let's see, convince us, and then you're hired. It's not going to ever happen. So I feel like if we're going to be delivering useful value for people, we ought to say, screw all that stuff. None of that's going to help you. It's all nice to have. It's great book selling stuff, but you really got to find somebody who can actually lead and make stuff happen.